You're about to meet Benito Mussolini, a man who would one day become the ruler of Italy. But before we dive into his life as a leader, let's take a step back and explore where it all began. Imagine yourself standing in the charming town of Predapio, nestled in the rolling hills of Italy. It's a warm summer day, July 29th, 1883, and a family is about to welcome a new addition. This baby boy, Benito Mussolini, is the third of four children born to Alessandro and Rosa Mussolini. As you watch him take his first breaths, you can't help but wonder what the future holds for this little one. Benito's father, Alessandro, was a blacksmith, a proud Italian who took great pride in his work and his country's history. He would often tell his children stories about the great Italian heroes, like Garibaldi and Victor Emmanuel II. These tales sparked a fire in Benito's heart, and he began to see himself as destined for greatness. He was going to rise above his humble beginnings and make a name for himself in the world. But what drove this sense of ambition in a young boy from a poor family? It's not just about the stories his father told him. It's also about the values he learned from his family. Benito's parents, despite their poverty, instilled in him a strong sense of self-worth and a desire to succeed. They encouraged him to read and learn, to explore the world around him, and to never give up on his dreams. As Benito grew up, he surrounded himself with like-minded individuals who shared his passion for Italian nationalism. They were a group of young men, mostly from working-class backgrounds, who felt a deep sense of resentment towards the wealthy elite and the government. They saw themselves as the underdogs, and they were determined to make a change. One of Benito's closest friends and mentors was a man named Giovanni Giolitti. Giolitti was a skilled politician who would later become a key figure in Italian politics. He saw potential in Benito and took him under his wing, teaching him the ins and outs of politics and how to navigate the complex world of Italian politics. Benito's relationship with Giolitti was more than just a mentorship. It was a bond that would last a lifetime. Giolitti became a father figure to Benito, offering guidance and support that went beyond politics. He encouraged Benito to pursue his education and to never lose sight of his dreams. As Benito entered his teenage years, he began to develop a strong sense of purpose. He realized that he wanted to make a difference in the world, to leave a lasting impact on Italian society. He started to get involved in local politics, attending rallies and meetings, and speaking out against the government's policies. Benito's mother, Rosa, played a significant role in his life, encouraging him to pursue his education and to never give up on his dreams. She was a strong influence on his life, and her support would stay with him throughout his journey. Fast forward to the early 1900s, and Benito Mussolini is now a young man with a clear vision for the future. He's determined to make a name for himself in the world of politics, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to achieve his goals. But as we'll see in the next section, Benito's rise to power wouldn't be without its challenges and controversies. As we reflect on Benito's early life, we're reminded that even the most unlikely individuals can achieve greatness. Benito's story is a testament to the power of hard work, determination, and the support of loved ones. But it's also a reminder that our actions have consequences and that the choices we make can shape the course of history. So, what can we learn from Benito's story? How can we apply his lessons to our own lives? Let's take a moment to think about it. What drives you to succeed? What are your passions and values? And how can you use your talents and abilities to make a positive impact on the world? As we continue to explore Benito's life, we'll encounter more twists and turns, more challenges and controversies. But for now, let's take a deep breath and reflect on the journey that brought us here. Benito's story is a complex and multifaceted one, full of surprises and revelations. And as we delve deeper into his life, we'll discover that even the most unlikely individuals can become leaders, and that the choices we make can shape the course of history. Let's move forward, shall we? What's next for Benito Mussolini? How will he navigate the complex world of Italian politics? And what challenges will he face along the way? Stay tuned to find out. You're standing in the midst of Italy's tumultuous post-war era, a time when the country was struggling to find its footing. The war is over, but the scars remain, and the government's handling of the conflict has left many Italians feeling disillusioned and frustrated. It's 1918, and Benito Mussolini, a young journalist with a passion for politics, is about to change the course of history. You're about to meet the man who would become the ruler of Italy. But before we dive into his life as a leader, let's take a step back and explore where it all began. Imagine yourself standing in the charming town of Predappio, nestled in the Apennine Mountains. This is where Mussolini was born on July 29, 1883. But, as you'll soon discover, his early life was far from ordinary. As Mussolini grew older, he became increasingly fascinated with politics and social justice. He was a charismatic young man with a quick wit and a sharp tongue, and he soon found himself drawn to the world of journalism. In 1909, he moved to Milan, where he began writing for several newspapers and magazines. It was during this time that he developed his oratory skills, which would later become the hallmark of his leadership style. Now, let's fast forward to 1915, when Italy entered World War I. Mussolini, who was then a young officer in the Italian army, was sent to the front lines. The war was brutal and senseless, and Mussolini soon found himself disillusioned with the government's handling of the conflict. He began to speak out against the war effort, and his opinions quickly gained attention. This marked the beginning of his rise as a revolutionary leader. As the war dragged on, Mussolini's disillusionment grew. He saw firsthand the devastating effects of war on ordinary people, and he became increasingly frustrated with the government's inability to address the needs of the Italian people. In 1918, he was discharged from the army and returned to Milan, where he began to build a following among the city's young intellectuals and radicals. It was during this time that Mussolini founded the Fascist Party, which would become the cornerstone of his political career. The party's initial goal was to promote a sense of national unity and pride among the Italian people. Mussolini's message was simple yet powerful. He promised a strong and powerful Italy, one that would be free from the influences of foreign powers and the corrupting effects of socialism. Mussolini's charisma and oratory skills made him a compelling figure, and he quickly attracted a loyal following. His message resonated with many Italians who felt disillusioned with the post-war government and the country's fragile economy. The Fascist Party's popularity grew rapidly, and by 1921, it had become a major force in Italian politics. As the Fascist Party's influence grew, Mussolini's ideology began to take shape. He was a firm believer in the importance of nationalism, militarism, and authoritarianism. He saw these values as the key to a strong and powerful Italy, one that would be respected by the world. His message was simple yet powerful. Italy needed a strong leader, one who would restore its honor and prestige on the world stage. But, as we'll explore in the next section, Mussolini's rise to power was not without its challenges. He faced fierce opposition from the Italian people, who were wary of his authoritarian tendencies and his promise of a powerful Italy. The road ahead would be fraught with danger, but Mussolini was undeterred. He was driven by a vision of a new Italy, one that would be strong, proud, and respected by the world. As you continue to explore the life of Benito Mussolini, you'll see how his early experiences shaped his worldview and his leadership style. You'll learn about the challenges he faced and the choices he made, which ultimately led him to become one of the most infamous leaders of the 20th century. But for now, let's leave Mussolini's story here, and in the next section, we'll explore the events that led him to the top of the Italian government. Retention hook. Imagine a world where a charismatic leader, with a message of national pride and unity, rises to power and becomes one of the most feared dictators of the 20th century. What would you do if you were living in Italy during this time? You're about to witness the dark side of power, a side that would change the course of history forever. Imagine yourself standing in the midst of a tumultuous Italy in 1922, where the fascist party is on the rise and Benito Mussolini is at its helm. You've heard of his charismatic leadership, but little do you know about the depths of his ambition and the brutal tactics he would use to achieve his goals. As Mussolini led a march on Rome, the Italian people were caught off guard by his audacity. The march was a bold move, one that would ultimately lead to his appointment as prime minister. Many saw him as a strong leader, someone who could bring stability and order to a country ravaged by war and economic crisis. But what they didn't see was the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. Mussolini's regime was marked by violence, intimidation, and repression. He used his secret police, the OVRA, to spy on and silence anyone who dared to speak out against him. His methods were ruthless, and those who opposed him were dealt with swiftly and severely. The Italian people were trapped in a web of fear, unable to speak their minds or challenge the regime without risking their lives. But why did this happen? How did a man who was once a revolutionary, a champion of the working class, become a ruthless dictator? The answer lies in the intoxicating power of absolute control. Mussolini was consumed by it, and he would stop at nothing to maintain his grip on Italy. He was a master manipulator, using propaganda and lies to control the narrative and shape public opinion. As you watch the Italian people living in fear, you can't help but wonder how this happened. How did a country that was once a beacon of hope and democracy become a dystopian nightmare? The answer is complex, but one thing is certain. Mussolini's regime was built on a foundation of lies, intimidation, and violence. Despite the brutal tactics, Mussolini remained popular with the Italian people. They saw him as a strong leader, someone who could deliver on his promises and restore Italy to its former glory. But this was a facade, a carefully crafted illusion designed to keep the people in line. In reality, Mussolini's regime was a dictatorship, one that would eventually lead to the downfall of his own regime. You're left wondering what could have been done differently. How could the Italian people have prevented this descent into darkness? The answer is complex, but one thing is certain. The warning signs were there, and they were ignored. The story of Mussolini's Italy is a cautionary tale, one that reminds us of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. As you reflect on the dark side of power, you can't help but think about the world we live in today. Are we witnessing a similar descent into darkness? Are we ignoring the warning signs? Or are we standing up for what is right? The answer is up to us, and it's a question that we must answer every day. Imagine yourself living in a world where fear and intimidation rule the day. It's a world that's familiar, yet foreign, a world that's full of contradictions. It's a world that we must never forget, a world that serves as a reminder of the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. The story of Mussolini's Italy is a powerful reminder that we must always be vigilant, that we must always stand up for justice and compassion, no matter the cost. And so, as you continue on this journey with us, remember that the lessons of history are not just about the past. They're about the future. They're about the choices we make today, the choices that will shape the world we live in tomorrow. Will we learn from the mistakes of the past, or will we repeat them? The answer is up to us, and it's a question that we must answer every day. You're about to witness the most pivotal moments of Benito Mussolini's life, moments that would cement his legacy forever. Imagine yourself standing in the midst of a world in turmoil, where the lines between ambition and destruction are blurred. As you walk through the streets of Rome, you can't help but feel the weight of Mussolini's foreign policy. His aggression and expansionism have marked the country, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The invasion of Ethiopia in 1935 was a turning point, a moment that would change the course of history forever. You remember the international condemnation, the economic sanctions that crippled the Italian economy. It was a decision that would come back to haunt Mussolini, a decision that would ultimately seal his fate. But why did Mussolini make this choice? What drove him to pursue an alliance with Nazi Germany, an alliance that would lead to the destruction of Italy? You begin to realize that Mussolini's ambition knew no bounds, that he was willing to sacrifice anything to achieve his goals. He saw Hitler as a powerful ally, a man who shared his vision for a new world order. But little did he know, this partnership would be his downfall. As the war turned against Italy, Mussolini's popularity began to wane. He became increasingly isolated and paranoid, making decisions that only serve to hasten his downfall. You can almost feel the tension in the air, the sense of desperation that gripped the country. It was as if Mussolini was trapped in his own web of deceit, unable to escape the consequences of his actions. You start to wonder, what if Mussolini had made different choices? What if he had chosen a path of diplomacy and cooperation instead of aggression and expansionism? Would Italy have been spared the devastation of war? Would Mussolini's legacy have been one of peace and prosperity instead of bloodshed and tyranny? The questions swirl in your mind, leaving you with more questions than answers. But one thing is clear, Mussolini's ambition was his downfall. His refusal to listen, to adapt, and to learn from his mistakes ultimately led to his demise. As you reflect on his life, you can't help but feel a sense of sadness, a sense of loss for a man who could have been so much more. But his story serves as a warning, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of empathy and compassion. It's a story that can teach us valuable lessons, lessons that can help us build a better world, a world that is more just, more equitable, and more loving. A world where we can all live in peace and harmony, free from the burdens of hatred and cruelty. You're about to witness the final act of Benito Mussolini's tumultuous life. Imagine yourself standing in the midst of a crumbling Italy in 1943, where the fascist regime is on its last breath. The Allies are closing in, and Mussolini's grip on power is starting to slip. In July 1943, the Italian military staged a coup, overthrowing Mussolini and arresting him. It was a shocking turn of events, one that left the dictator stunned and helpless. But Mussolini's time in captivity was short-lived. German commandos, loyal to their leader, rescued him and spirited him away to safety. As the Allies advanced on Italy, Mussolini's regime continued to crumble. He fled to the north, where he established a puppet government, but it was too little, too late. The people of Italy had had enough of his authoritarian rule, and they were determined to bring him down. On April 28, 1945, Mussolini's fate was sealed. Italian partisans, fighting for their freedom and their country, cornered the dictator and his loyal followers in a small town in the north. In a final, desperate bid for power, Mussolini attempted to flee, but he was caught and executed on the spot. The news of Mussolini's death sent shockwaves around the world. It marked the end of his regime and the beginning of a new era for Italy. A country that had been torn apart by conflict and division was finally free to rebuild and start new. As we reflect on Mussolini's life and legacy, we're reminded of the dangers of ambition and the corrupting influence of power. His story is a cautionary tale, one that warns us of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of empathy and understanding in leadership. But Mussolini's story is also a reminder of the importance of promoting tolerance, understanding, and kindness in our own lives and communities. It's a reminder that we all have the power to make a difference, to create a world that is more just, more compassionate, and more inclusive. So let's take a lesson from history and strive to create a world where everyone has the chance to thrive. A world where power is not used to oppress and dominate, but to uplift and empower. A world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect.